Welcome to the only show that brings you happiness in the world of diplomacy and international relations, Diplomatic Affairs. My name is Harriet Nati. The show comes off every Saturday on the platforms of Pan-African Television between the hours of 4:20 to 5:20 p.m. We are also global via Facebook and YouTube. So wherever you find yourself, you can always catch up with us and get to know what is happening when it comes to issues pertaining to diplomacy and international relations. Today we have a very important assignment. Our assignment is to bring to you in details the move that has been made by the United States of America's President, Mr. Donald Trump. Mr. Donald Trump has decided to carry out an executive order, one that has shaken the entire world. What he is doing is to deport all undocumented migrants from the United States of America. Now, we want to find out how this actually affects relations between the United States of America and its allies or the rest of the world. President Donald Trump has signed an executive order which paves way for all undocumented migrants in the United States to be repatriated to their various home countries. This move has affected citizens of so many countries across the globe, including Ghana. Now, government has stated that measures are being put in place to reintegrate Ghanaians who are affected by this move. In our quest to understand the gravity of the situation at hand, we decided to engage an international relations expert at the Ghana Institute of Management and Public Administration, GIMPA, Dr. Wilberforce Gisa, to throw some light on this issue and how it affects bilateral relations between the United States of America and the rest of the world. Let's get to that interview. Hello there, you're welcome to Diplomatic Affairs. We have the privilege of engaging someone who knows what to say, how to go about it, how to actually unpack the subjects for us to understand. And he is an expert in this game. I am very happy to be sitting here with my former lecturer. He is in the person of Dr. Wilberforce Gisa, and he is the head of Department, School of Technology and Social Sciences, and also the former rector of the Ghana Institute of Journalism. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. Let's begin with the deportation of some migrants, undocumented migrants, in the United States of America. Obviously, Ghana has over 150 affected people, Ghanaians affected when it comes to this exercise carried out by the United States of America. For me, I am looking, because if you ask government will tell you we are putting in place measures. As to the details of the measures, they are not known, and we are curious. We'll be speaking to government to also learn more about the details that they are putting in place when it comes to this particular incident. But from where you sit as an expert when it comes to international relations, global affairs, I want us to talk about how this should be tackled, so much so that we can benefit as a country instead of making them look like a burden on the state.
Thank you. I think it's unfortunate to have a new government in place which is about to actually settle down, and then you are hit with some of these crises. But it's also important that we must always be ready. And so the issue of first and foremost is for us to see how we can use our diplomatic channels. The government of Ghana, we have our mission in the United States, so Washington and even New York, we have a consular mission. So the first thing is for us to ensure that we use all the diplomatic channels to ensure that the process is smooth, that our citizens are treated with dignity, and also ensure that all the necessary support and assistance they need are extended to them. And then back home, I think that I would expect the government to set up a repatriation task force. A repatriation task force that will be solely responsible for handling our brothers and sisters who are going to be repatriated or brought back home. So the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of the Interior should be key in setting up some kind of task force to actually manage this process, and also ensure that our Ministry of Foreign Affairs will be in constant touch with our Ghanaian mission abroad in Washington, and also to ensure that the U.S. immigration authorities manage the process and ensure that there is clear communication throughout, and ensure that the process is smooth and that the dignity of our citizens are not violated. We have to also look at the reintegration support.
Right.
Of course, we will need to, we have staff in our embassy in DC, and then we also have to look at the pre-departure counseling, or they need that to actually psychologically prepare them as to calm down and what they expect, and then the issue of, because some of them may begin to be thinking about rejection.
Right.
So all these things will have to be looked at, and I think that luckily we have the International Organization for Migration also. So
IOM.
when we are talking about this task force, IOM, so we are talking about this task force. They ought to be part of this task force to help to provide the counseling and training on what to expect upon arrival. So this has to be put in place. The issues of mental health issues, and because there is likely to be a cultural shock, because some of them they are not expecting this situation. They expect that the American dream that they talked about, that once they enter into the U.S., they will realize their dream, they will have what it takes, and then for them to become somebody's, and then also by the time that maybe they envisage or they dream of coming back, they would have actually
in a good position.
In a good position to even probably help their families and also the nation. So integration services on arrival are important. We should offer the basic services such as medical screening, psychological counseling, and then we have to give them assistance as how we are going to re-establish a connection with their family members. And for those without family support, also social services could be extended to them to provide them with a housing and basic needs. But it should not be done as if they are becoming a burden on
the state.
So, and then government, even though we have challenges with employment and all that, we should also start thinking about job placement and skills development. Some of them may become with skills. So we have to look at these skills and then the skill needs, and where there are gaps, how can we fill that and ensure that they actually reintegrate properly. So those without their skills, those who have it can be transferred to the local job market to assist, to boost our revenue, and also provide services that probably are lacking in our economy. So therefore, vocational training, language skills for those who probably don't have it, we may be looking at those areas. And I think that it's important that government takes a critical look, they plan, so you have a team that will look at all these areas and actually engage them to see how they can be reintegrated to the system. So basically that is it. And if there is the need, we can also look at those who probably, some of them might have sold, they might have been in good employment, they might have been entrepreneurs before they left, because we all have some of these stories of our colleagues when we were outside this country, where people were working in banks, even risen to managers and the rest, think that there is a better opportunity out there, and then they go and they actually realize there's a shock of the fact that they have to probably just be doing security to survive. And because of the kind of imbalance, you see, the gap between what they were doing, the skill set, and then they have gone in and thinking that they would actually get a decent job to do, that they realize that they are into cleaning services and doing security. So all these things actually is a kind of stigmatization that you being at this level and you are coming back with nothing, and that at the end of the day it can create a certain kind of psychological trauma for them. So we need to look at that and see whether we can reintegrate them in terms of looking at even job placement programs that can be essential for reintegration to the workforce. And then, so as I said about the micro finance, for example, entrepreneurial support, those who have been in industry, those who have had entrepreneurs, small entrepreneurs or whatever, they may still have some skill sets. So can we put in place some a financial model to help them, give them some microfinance to support them to actually start a business and get back on their feet? I think that because they might have learned they might have some few experiences and learn a few things out there that could also be beneficial to us. I don't know, but we can also be looking at issues of addressing some legal issues, because you see, some of them have lost track of their Ghanaian citizenship status in terms of whether they have our IDs, they have passport, they might have lost some of these things. So when they return, what do we do to ensure that once we can provide, they can provide some
that should be the first
basic
step.
information they need to be issued with IDs and the proper documentation so that they can legally settle down and reintegrate into the society. Some might have criminal records. That also is important that we look at that. So taking them, screening them and ensuring that we are not bringing people into our society that could rather tend to be a curse in terms of increasing the crime rate. So all these things, I believe that our security will take up that one. I would also like to talk about community reception. Importantly, once we involve, when they go through the screening, there should also be awareness creation. We should let the communities, the people, as a people, we must accept that these are our own brothers and sisters, and therefore we must accord them the necessary support rather than seeing them as outcasts. And that is important. So the reception that we give them also will actually help them to settle down, for them to realize that all is not lost. Otherwise, they could still go through some of these trauma and it can be a problem for us. So community awareness and integration programs could also be, in terms of public awareness campaigns, to ensure that we foster that culture of tolerance and also support for the deportees. So if you can do that, it will help us to combat the potential stigma and discrimination. So we need to look at that. Then maybe finally is to talk about public health and social services. Upon arrival, we need to give them the medical checkups to ensure that they are not carrying infectious disease or illnesses. And those things are very basic, and I think we should do that. And as I said, the mental health services part. They've been living in the US for a long time. Many faced some kind of emotional trauma, as we said. So psychological issues, maybe due to separation from their families, the loss of their livelihoods, because maybe what they earn there, if you look at the exchange rate and all that. So, and then the challenge that they are coming with nothing, and then how they can reintegrate, and all these things are very, very important. And we should also establish some strong communication with their families. It is important for them to see the need to embrace them. That's why we are talking about the community reception. You should not just take it that, they've left. Some of them don't even reconnect with us, and then suddenly they are coming to be a burden. We should look at the biblical story of the prodigal son. And if we are minded by that, then I think that will be on a very sound footing to reconnect and to reintegrate them into our society.
Indeed, Doc, the private sector has to be given what it needs, the needed support to be able to also assist or help governments in integrating these people who are coming back home. Indeed, when you look at the difference in systems, this is a more advanced environment we are talking about. We are still developing in trying to catch up to that level of advancement in terms of development. Do you think that these people would have that kind of confidence in our system, especially given the fact that they are going through a lot? They are being forced to come back home when they are not ready to be back home? Do they have that confidence in our system to even begin with, to allow them to somehow open up and embrace the sudden changes?
It's difficult, as I said, because not many of them say that they're going to be coming back home in this state. So, but we must also remember that that's somebody's country. This is our country. You can't call somebody's country your home. Home sweet home. They've been here before. And at the end of the day, those of us back home, those of us here, we are not starving. We are surviving. And people are doing well. So they will have to look into the future with hope and optimism rather than looking into the past. So the issue of pessimism should give way to optimism, that even God has a plan for everybody's life. So they must look at the philosophical aspect of that from the biblical point of view, that if they believe in the Christian faith, the Christian virtues, they must believe that there are better days ahead. Some of them might come back home, reintegrate, and before you realize they are doing better than, because it's also true that some of these people really wanted to come back home, but because of the stigma, because of the rejection that you have been, because of the perception of once you move into Europe or to the US, you are going to come back better off. So that could also be a factor. But I believe that if we put in place all the mechanisms and ensure that they get the necessary support in no time. I have seen that when the deportees from Nigeria came back home, they used to have the National Mobilization Program, and then they will have to go to the district offices of National Mobilization Program and take oil and some few essential items. Most of these people reintegrated, especially majority of these people were teachers then, were professionals who left for Nigeria in the 80s. So after the 70s and 80s, when they came back, they reintegrated. Most of them occupy high profile positions before they retired. Not many of them today, so we can check that it's not the first time, it's not going to be the last time. And that we need to retrace our steps and then see how we can actually help them to reintegrate, and then how they can also use their skills and their talent to help move the country forward.
Thank you so much for your time. We will leave it here, and I believe as these stories develop, we will be seeking your opinion around, the latest developments as well. We really, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for making the time to speak to us. We appreciate it. So we've been speaking to Dr. Wilberforce Gisa, and he is the head of department, School of Technology and Social Sciences, and of course former rector of the Ghana Institute of Journalism, and my former lecturer as well. So I am happy to be back home. Thank you so much once again for your time, Doc. So yes, we've been trying to speak to the experts to get their views on these developments, the deportation of some undocumented migrants in the United States of America. Again, an executive order carried out by the President of the United States of America, Donald Trump, and with Ghanaians, some Ghanaians affected, over 150 of them. We heard the minister, the newly appointed Minister for Foreign Affairs, Okudzeto Ablakwa, talked about the need to establish or put in place consular funds for Ghanaians abroad. But in the interim, what should be the measures? We've just heard the experts' opinion on some recommendations. We do believe that policy makers do watch this platform from time to time and might be informed by some of the recommendations made by our experts. Thank you so much for your time. Still on the same issue, we spoke to some members of the public to gather their views on this particular issue. Now here is what they say.
Basically, it's a foreign policy of the American people and being championed by the President Donald Trump. And in the international arena, you realize that every president has its own foreign policy direction. Now, if it so happens that the Deportation Act by Donald Trump is going to affect Ghanaians, then it means that there's a deliberate national interest that is being perpetuated by Donald Trump. Now, one would also ask that what is the genesis of this one? We realize that most of the migrants are not documented. Now, it so happens that Donald Trump wants to sanitize the American system, so to say. But one would also say that the Biden administration were the ones who were also benefiting from these migrants. So it means that there's a foreign policy shift from the Biden administration into the Donald Trump administration. Now, on the face of it, you realize that it is in bad taste for these migrants who are being affected. But one will also say that it's a foreign policy decision by a country. Now, if you look at the determinants of a foreign policy, individuals or leaders are also part of the determinants of foreign policy. And foreign policy cuts in two ways, I mean, both internal and external. So basically, the deportation of the migrants is an internal foreign policy that is being perpetuated by Donald Trump. Now, one would also want to argue that how do Africans or African leaders navigate this foreign policy directive by the president, Donald Trump? I think that it's a wake-up call for leaders in Africa to also formulate a foreign policy, an internal foreign policy that will help embrace these migrants. Most of them have expertise. They've learned a thing or two in America, which we can find ways and means to tap from it and integrate it into the system. Now, one would also say that, I mean, it is as if all hope is lost. All hope is not lost. I think that there should also be a deliberate attempt in formulating our foreign policy that is going to mitigate what Donald Trump is trying to perpetuate. So basically, I think that all is not lost. I mean, there are ways that we can also mitigate what Donald Trump has. National interest is a key ingredient of a foreign policy. So regardless of whether it affects the other country, it's a national policy and based on their interest. Probably one would also want to say that he is trying to sanitize the system, which is going to inure to the benefit of Americans. And mind you, the American people, most of them agrees with what Donald Trump is doing. So basically, it means that it's a deliberate attempt to also sanitize their system. Now, bringing it back home, I think that it's in two folds. That our governments in Africa and the affected countries can also turn it around, deliberately putting up policies that are going to harness the human capital potentials of these returnee migrants. Now, I realize that there have been migrant integrations programs run by various NGOs and all those ones. I think that it is about time government take a deliberate action, a deliberate policy that is going to help integrate these returnees into our country.
Ghanaians, when you talk to most youth of today, even back then, most people want to go abroad in search of greener pastures and all that. And one day you just wake up and then you just hear that such a thing has been passed. It's kind of a big blow. And so what I personally think, personally, I have no idea of, but then so many people. So I'm just trying to put myself in their shoes, waking up one day and then you are told you are going back to your country with the hope of no job. Probably some parents are no more. You don't have a place of residence. You don't know whether you are starting from A or B. So it's kind of a huge turn. It's unfortunate, but this is where the leadership and the governance of Ghana come into the picture. It means that we have to be proactive in terms of governance, in terms of leadership, how we have to put measures. We always put measures in place, strategies in making sure that we cater for some of these people who are going to be part of or brought home to be part of us again. After all, this is their home, but then how do we accommodate them?
And our law revolves, and once it revolves, it can be based on the jurisdiction. Now, if Trump has not signed any treaty with Ghana, and we know that treaties are ratified under Article 75 of the 1992 Constitution by Parliament, and then the President will therefore commence such implementation. Now, if there is no such an agreement between Ghana and US, and people are illegally finding their way in the US, I think if Trump issues such decrees, they are in the right direction, unless there has been such agreements between Ghana and US where we may say that there is a breach, and for that matter, Ghana can take up the matter and deal with it. But once there is no such agreement, of which we have illegal immigrants finding their way in US and he deporting them, legally is in the right direction and nothing can be done about that. We just have to use diplomatic ways to deal with it. So that is what I would say from that perspective. Ghana government, what Ghana government can do is that they can reach out to the United States of America, and for that matter, maybe they can come into an agreement and sign some treaty to deal with this issue in a very diplomatic way, because the truth of the matter is no state is sovereign. And yes, we have sovereign states. However, we depend on each other. US may depend on Ghana for some raw materials in terms of their industry to power their industry. Ghana might also depend on US for some sort of funding or some sort of diplomatic ties to develop the country. However, if this kind of tension is arising, it's going to create that kind of tension, and blocks are going to arise out of some of these things, and it will actually not help in diplomatic ways of dealing with things, because countries depend on each other. So I think that the Ghana government can reach out to the United States government and sign a treaty to deal with this issue in a very diplomatic way that will help all of us.
This is where we draw the curtain on today's episode of Diplomatic Affairs. Thanks so much for your company, and we look forward to seeing you same time next week. My name is Harriet Nati. Enjoy the rest of our programs.